We are very excited to kick off this session, not only because of what you heard as a little bit of a trailer from Stefanie a couple of minutes ago, but also because this is the first time we're piloting our interactive component to these virtual sessions. You're going to hear a lot more from Kim as we go along. But I think from my side, I just say it's a pilot, so be gentle with us. But then we're looking forward to hearing your feedback as well. Kim, I'll hand it over to you now.
Great. Thank you, Jagathi. And thank you. So great to see everybody here today. It does feel a little bit like spring in the air, which is great. That as Jagathi had mentioned, we really appreciated all the energy that you brought to the session last month. Both in terms of your input in terms of content and format, and we'll continue to solicit feedback as we're moving forward. So a little bit of a sneak peek you heard about. Soon we're going to be providing some feedback on an exciting extension to FintechWomen in the academic space. So that will really help to supplement programming, et cetera. So more to come there, and I'll call out Laura, who's done a phenomenal amount of work, and we'll be talking more about that. But again, as Jagathi mentioned, we're trying something new today. So be patient, fingers crossed, all goes smoothly. And I'm going to try and catch us up a little bit because we really want to be able to make sure that we have that time for it to be interactive. The content today, though, is around communication, which came forward as a topic of interest expressed by many of you. And we thought that given the facets of communication in the digital virtual world, it made sense to really hit this topic now. Particularly as we're coming up on, unbelievably, a year in this new virtual world. And I think, as we all know, the semblance of, of virtual work is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And, whether working in the academic world or the work world as we know it, it's been changed. And so it's really causing us to think a lot about our long-term approach professionally and how to be our best as leaders, associates, and teammates. So to that end, we're going to try and tackle 4 key themes. And, specifically really kind of looking at women and communication in general and what makes it different for us. Is it gender, business disciplines, generational, all of the above? We've heard a lot about it, and I think Stefanie touched on this just in terms of, the isolation, depression, overburdened, right? We want to talk a lot about what's happening there for folks that are overburdened. And how we might best be able to either, if that's you or if it is people that are working with you or for you, some techniques there. And along with that, what are some techniques around some active listening and knowing your audience, the best way to communicate, which isn't always, in a virtual way. And then, again, as we talked about, that this is going to continue. So what's the evolution of virtual communications and what we should expect? So to make sense of it all, I'm really thrilled to have Allison MacLeod and Stefanie Heiter here joining us today. And first, I'd like to introduce Allison, excuse me. As Executive Vice President of Global Marketing, Allison leads Flywire's global marketing strategy, focusing on amplifying the company's brand and scaling its performance in marketing, global communication, and sales enablement efforts. She has over 15 years of marketing experience across global marketing and communication roles. Prior to Flywire, Allison, led the growth of marketing and operations at Rapid7, where she focused optimizing the company's growth by building and scaling demand generation, technology and analytics, and developing strong teams. Additionally, she's worked at Forrester and in several digital and field-based roles that included establishing the research firm's international corporate marketing function in Europe and driving its online localization strategy. So Allison holds a master's in integrated marketing from Emerson and a BA in communications from UMass Amherst. I'm also thrilled to have Stefanie back with us today as co-founder and CEO of Bridging Distance. Stefanie is an expert in the area of communication and in the remote digital world. And she's helped pioneer the field of dispersed teaming and leadership since 1997 and is among the nation's leading thinkers and consultants on the human side of virtual work. She enhances people's ability to thrive in the digital workplace through improved productivity at the intersection of technology and relationship building. So clearly key to our discussion today. She's authored numerous published articles in the area of virtual leadership, teams, and communications. In addition, she's a very busy working mom herself, and in her spare time enjoys hiking, photography, and canoeing and biking as well. So welcome to you both, and thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with both of you, and as we prepared for today's session, and I know we could probably talk forever. So again, I have asked Jagathi to kind of help keep us moving again, so we keep respect your time. But I'd really like to start off with that first key theme that we talked about around communication in general for women in fintech. Clearly a male-dominated field. And get your thoughts around, is there a gender slant, or what are you seeing in terms of differences across business verticals, generations? And I guess the third piece of that is, has the virtual nature of communication over the past few months impacted any of this as well? So Allison, I'm going to kick to you first. I'd love to hear your story as being a female leader in a male-dominated industry.
Yeah, so thank you. Really excited to be here. And, communication is definitely a topic near and dear to my heart. I do think that the virtual world has changed all of us, right? The way we communicate. I think specifically when we think about being women leaders, the virtual world has in some areas made it a little bit easier, right? Where oftentimes things that might have been around the water cooler or out for dinner with colleagues or team members has also sort of leveled the playing field with everyone being in a virtual environment, able to connect with each other. On the flip side, I think I've certainly noticed with different females that I lead or mentor, there's also that missed opportunity often to make sure that women have right opportunities or great opportunities to get more exposure, to share their work internally, to meet with other people. And oftentimes it's, as leaders, we have to make sure that we're making that space for women. And that is, it's extra work, it's taking more steps, but it's incredibly important. I think one thing that's so important in all of this, and it's certainly been a big reminder to myself, is understanding communication styles, not only our own, but also others. I was reading, I think I shared this with Kim and Stefanie. I was reading an article last week about how we sort of hit this pandemic wall. All of us collectively as humans, we've been at it for a year now, and a lot of these niceties have kind of gone out the window. And often we'll just particularly work, like you're getting into this routine, I'm going to open my laptop and I'm going to go right at it. And we often don't understand the way we're communicating and how that's being perceived. And I think women in particular tend to struggle with that a little bit more. So often that like in the background, you'll hear little feet probably running by this room or screaming. And I was about to send a text that said, hey, can you make sure the kids aren't screaming for the next hour? But you know what? It's kind of life, right? Everyone's dealing with it. And as, a mom, leader in fintech, like that's sort of the world we're all in right now, and making sure that we're being, making sure that we're being forgiving of these situations and also accommodating and understanding.
Yeah. In some ways, it's sort of humanized it though too, yeah. Right? And seeing people's pets and children and all those kinds of things. It definitely is interesting. Stefanie, you've mentioned you were teeing up, some of the research you've done around this, and we've talked about some of the particularly the gender differences. So love to just kick it over to you and share your thoughts around this topic.
So first, I just want to make a quick comment to Allison's point. We published a blog in the summer called "Is Everybody Getting Snippy or Is It Just Me?" And it's around that electronic body language, digital body language, and the ways in which we just, sometimes it just happens. So anyway, I think it's fine. I love that you didn't send the text. So I wanted to just reference that. There's a lot of things I could say about this, as people know, but I wanted to talk about some research that we did recently revalidating our virtual leadership model. And fundamentally, I want to talk about this, I'll probably label as men and women, but I also want us to think about it more of as a masculine and a feminine style, to Allison's point around communication styles. So thinking about masculine versus feminine as a style and a continuum rather than a black and white. And that doesn't undermine the social justices or unconscious biases, but I think from a style perspective, that's important. And so fundamentally what we found is that women, or those with a more feminine style, are better at virtual leadership more quickly. And fundamentally, that is for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think to quote Ginger Rogers, women have to do it backwards and in heels. And so we have more hurdles to surmount, right? And so instead of feeling like virtual leadership or managing across distance is a wall, for women, it's just a hurdle that we have to overcome, and we do that, right? Secondly, I think that men and women in communications, if anybody's ever studied the work of Deborah Tannen, women and men in communication styles, men approach the world in terms of competition. Are you above and below me, or below me? And therefore, if you're above me, my job is to knock you off, right? And bring you down. Women approach it in terms of cooperation, and we are socialized for women to cooperate with each other, and we are dinged for being competitive. And so that means that the ways in which we talk to each other matter. And that has an impact in terms of how people think about how they're going to work together. And so that competition ends up being more transactional versus transformational, right? So women have a transformational leadership style. Like we want to help, we want to interact with people, we want to lead you so that you will do better. Versus men have a more transactional style because they're looking at the ways in which they need to protect their turf. Again, these are generalizations, and we found that to be particularly poignant in virtual leadership across all kinds of distance because it mattered. And so to the other question around how does that impact it, what we've seen over the last year in COVID is that soft skills matter more. And I think there's an increased attention to those soft skills, to being able to do team building, to being able to check in. And I think, Allison's examples come up with that. We hear that again and again in terms of what that looks like. And the critical integration of those soft skills and team building into the ways in which we are working on a daily basis. So meetings are not just about the agenda and transactions. They're also about the ways in which we connect with each other. So virtual meetings in COVID have a dual purpose, and that's important to hold on to.
Great. And Allison, I'd just like to come back to you for a second, because I think on this topic, the generational piece, you had, some interesting feedback around, kind of what you see as in terms of how men and women lead differently, right? And in terms of, promotional, like how men are, kind of evaluated during promotional opportunities versus women. And I didn't know if you wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. So if you go out, and I believe it's on LinkedIn and Medium, but a friend who's a CMO at Starburst wrote an article probably about 6 months ago called "She's Not That Strategic," and it's incredibly powerful because you read it and it really speaks to you. And it talks about how, and I think as women, right, and hopefully the men in the audience too can. This will also resonate with you, but women often just get stuff done, right? Like we are there, we execute, we're given a task, we get it done. But often that leads to women not always saying, hey, let me show you what I've done. Let me promote the work that I've been doing. Let me show you the impact. So a lot of the article talks about how women get stuff done, they hit their goals, they follow through, they're leading teams, they're doing all of this. But when it comes time to like, is it time to move this woman to an executive role? She's not very strategic. She's very task driven. So I think oftentimes we see those different styles of women just getting the work done, where men take that time to build the rapport, to promote what they're doing, to talk about the big ideas in the future. And that's one thing that really needs to be recognized. Like it's something that I try to, one, remind myself to do, right, as a female and as a leader. And secondly, make sure that I'm, thank you, Yagathi. And then making sure that for the women that I lead or mentor, that they're taking those opportunities to advocate for themselves, to say like, look what I did. This is important. I want to show you like the progress I've made. And that those are some of the steps to getting ahead. And then also, I think there's always this bias for oftentimes, and I'll use the lens of the mom, just being a mom and seeing other female leaders that are parents as well, of decisions being made for women, right? Like, well, oof, I don't know. There's a lot on her plate. She's got a lot going on with work and home life. I don't know if it's a great opportunity for her to take on right now, where it should be up to that individual, man or woman, to make that, there we go, to make that choice of their career and what they can take on. So those were like two of the things I've noticed just talking to a lot of my colleagues, talking to other women and how they feel in the workplace and how they think they're perceived. But definitely worth sharing, and certainly check out that article because it's a good one.
And that's a
thing, Kim. I just
sorry.
want to say one thing that ties back, right? And it won't be long. That what Allison is saying has to do with the fact that women are dinged, are not rewarded and often in trouble for being boastful, because we're not supposed to, because we're supposed to be cooperative and not competitive. Yep. So when we're competitive, it's seen. And so there's this great cartoon that has a man and a woman facing their computer screens backs to each other. And the man looks at it and says, "What's the difference between being aggressive and assertive?" And the woman says, "Your gender."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a great point. And it really, again, I think it helps us pivot nicely to this next topic, in terms of very realistically, the overburdening. And I think everybody's feeling that COVID fatigue. However, I think this overwhelming data that shows how women have been disproportionately impacted as a result of having to wear the multiple hats. And as a result, I think just a really startling fact is that they're leaving the workforce in record numbers. And I think it was reported last fall that as many as 4 times the number of women have dropped out of the workforce since the fall as men. And that represents almost 900,000 women that have selected out just because of the hats that they're having to wear, compared to about 216,000 men. And reports are saying that, the setbacks of this, the strides that the women have made over the years, could be impacting us for years to come. So, thinking about fintech in particular, this is really concerning, is already being such a male-dominated field. So, Allison, I want to come to you on this first in terms of, what are you seeing? You had some nice examples of some steps that your company's taking or other companies taking to try and mitigate any of this, or at least provide support to women and also others who are, quite frankly, just feeling overly burdened.
Yeah. So I will spend a few moments shamelessly plugging Flywire, because I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've been doing and also supporting women, and even pre-COVID, right? Like, from my own experience, I started as an executive at Flywire 2 years ago and found out 3 weeks into my brand new job that I was pregnant with my 3rd child. And for most women, that would be like oh my gosh, what does this mean for the future? How is this going to impact my career and my role? And the moment I told my manager, the CEO, that I was pregnant with, his first reaction without even blinking an eye was, "That's amazing. Congrats." Yeah. So I would say that's one thing too. And even, even pre-COVID, right? Like when we have amazing flymates, that's what we call ourselves, women or male, if people need to make a lifestyle change, and for some women that would be coming back to the workplace and not knowing if, they're ready for, do I want home? Do I want to be a full-time mom? Do I want to be a full-time worker? I'm not ready for that decision. Like, I have a few women on my team that are part-time because it's really important for them to have that balance and that home. And that's something that we've always been very accepting of. I think some of the things that we've really tried to do, and putting even a finer lens on it during COVID, is making sure that we're truly there for employees. We have a whole focus on wellness and engagement. And across all different things. So I think oftentimes companies might go right to those that are affected most, right? Whether that's parents or others. But it's also important to recognize in this time that everyone is burdened. Like, we are all living in just craziness, and everyone's dealing with their own levels of burden. So I think one of the things that we've tried to do for all Flymates, right? One, different wellness activities, whether that's exercise or mental well-being classes, or different parenting workshops, right, geared towards different people, but also ensuring that people have time to take off. So along with your PTO, giving digital disconnect days, which is literally take the day, disconnect completely, and the only thing we ask is that you share what you're up to on your Slack channel, on our Slack channel, which is great because then you get to see all these different things that people are doing. Especially we're very global company, so when we're in offices, we have 12 offices around the world, so it's really cool just to see all the different things that people are up to. And then making sure we have give back days. We spend a lot of time as well. We have a great diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that's actually run by Flymates. So just yesterday, there was an open forum around Black History Month, right? So a lot of open forums around what's happening in the world. People can share. We try to make it as open as possible with all employees to be able to share, what they're going through, but make sure that they have the space that they need. I think at the end of the day, for all of us as people on the receiving end and people as leaders, is to give each other a little bit more leeway and kindness. We've like Stefanie, you mentioned that is everyone getting snippy? Is it just me? We've all really hit that point. So a lot of the niceties are going out the window. Like we were on a high a year ago. Now we're like a year later, we're still doing this. So I think really making sure that you provide that space for the employees, that they have a voice to share, and just recognizing your styles when you're communicating with others. Because as much as we try to make this authentic with the video screen, it's still hard to feel like it is.
Yeah. Thank you. Stefanie, what are you seeing on that? Again, you've been working on this for a while, and would love to hear, what you've seen, how this is impacting women in particular.
So obviously, I mean, the impact is taking a toll emotionally, and as I said, sort of as the precursor, women tend to feel more lonely. They're isolated, but they tend to feel lonely, and lonely is not something that's really sort of acceptable to talk about. But a couple of thoughts in terms of things that we can do, and it's sort of moving from the in-person to a results-based kind of virtual enablement way. And some of that is really from in-person is this perception of work performance. So, Allison, she comes into the office and her car is there by 6:30 and she didn't leave until 7, so she must be a hard worker. But really moving from that definition of perceptions of how hard somebody works to actual expectations for deliverables and results. And we know that lots of research shows that men are hired based on the perception of what they can accomplish, and they're hired and promoted, versus women are promoted based on what they have accomplished. And so, again, that's really important to understand. We can't change those biases. Second, I'll make 2 more points. Second is that you want to think about, rather than having defined working areas, talking about defined availability. So for especially dual parents who are trying to balance childcare and schools and all those different things, to be able to say, I'm gonna, with your partner, whatever, from 10 to 12, I'm doing schooling or I'm doing whatever. And so again, instead of defined working areas, talking about defined availability, and what are the times that people need to find acceptable. And that's actually good practice even when we get to post-COVID, because for global teams, that defined availability is really important because of time zone differences. And then the expectation in terms of expectations for visibility. So rather than, we saw a lot of companies monitoring people's computer use to define whether or not they were staying productive. And what we want to do is instead have expectations for visibility. And then for women in particular, it's response, right? Women get dinged a lot because we're sending emails at Saturday night at 9:30 because that's when the kids are in bed and that's when we finally have a chance. But the expectation isn't that you respond. And so I think that puts stress on lots of people, for even women or men, to say, we don't have to respond for 24 hours or 48. I'm just doing this now. Right. And then lastly, bite-sized content, not making it huge and not huge projects, just bite-sized to make it manageable. So women who tend to take on that burden, and it's one more thing in our minds, if we can chunk it out in small ways and make it easy, that pulls the stress away.
Thank you. And I think, one of the things that we had talked about as we were preparing for this session is, you're hearing from Allison and from Stefanie some great thoughts of what a company's actually doing and some strategies, as well as what research is showing us. But we want to hear from all of you. Like, what are you feeling? We'd like to hear, what are you experiencing yourselves or experiencing when communicating with others who you think probably are overburdened? And any tips that you might share, or, anything you'd like to see from a communication perspective. So we're just going to ask everybody just to take the next minute and go into the chat and just share with us kind of where are you today in terms of this topic.
Kim, are you moving into the breakouts right after this?
I'm not, but I'm going to combine a question.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear what people's responses to this are and what's happening and getting a pulse from people.
Do you have anybody sharing?
I'm happy to share verbally too. If it's quicker, that helps. I don't know if this is Kristen. I was just typing in, I can totally resonate with exactly what you all just talked about. And I think too, a former boss of mine always told me, I take roles where you're going to be lonely, because women tend to take these kind of stretch assignments. We're not finance professionals, maybe we're not technologists. We're in these hybrid, we do everything, we sign up for a lot more type roles. And just by nature, we become kind of lonely in the sense that we don't have those kind of peer groups to collaborate and bounce things off of, because we're in these kind of unique roles. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, that's what kind of resonated with me. And I also wanted to share, I have a person on my team at my company. I work at a small fintech, and just seeing the isolation with some of the younger folks that aren't able to see their family and stuff has really been eye-opening. So, those informal touch points to ask, how are you doing? Did you actually go outside in the last few days, right? Have you left your apartment, right? And typical conversations we would have never had before, but intentionally pulsing to make sure, just from a mental health perspective, the individual's okay, right?
And I think that's so important, because obviously our focus is on women, but this cuts across gender, cuts across age groups, and particularly the younger workers who maybe how they're connecting to culture, how they're really learning and being coached and all those kinds of things. I think that's really important for leaders to keep a lens on. Anybody else? Okay, Jagathi, the core aspect. That's right. Yeah. It really does. It's leadership, right? And it's how that cascades down, and, really, really important.
Tim, could I make a comment?
Yes.
Of course, I can't talk from a woman's perspective, but I'm noticing it more at the student level, and that's something that we should take into consideration.
Yep.
There are some students, they may want to weigh in on this, that are on the call right now, but I think I'm finding it harder to connect with my students than when I'm in the room. Of course, that's natural. And I can only imagine what's going on. Allison could probably talk about that. I don't know how old her children are. Public schools are probably worse because they're younger. But I catch the students sometimes, they sign on and they go do something else.
Right.
That happens quite a bit. But look, they're paying for the education. They're the ones that are losing out. Unless I'm the worst teacher in the world, I don't know. But I think it's very difficult for students to connect. I would think I would have Zoom fatigue at this point.
Yep.
So maybe some of the students may want to weigh in.
Well, and Ken, I think that's a great thought. And if you don't mind, I'm going to pivot us to just kind of a next question on that, because you hit exactly what I wanted to tee up. And then what we're going to do is break out so that everybody will have more of an opportunity to share individually, and then we can come back and talk. But, for Allison and Stefanie, I mean, that the Zoom fatigue is real. And I know we talked about, how you think about, excuse me, how you think about your interactions these days, really around, that active listening, knowing your audience. And this format isn't necessarily the be all end all, right? And so I'm going to tee up a couple of different themes here. So, as we think about this as we move forward, and all indications are that we are going to be in a hybrid model, right, for a while, whether it's academics, Ken, as you mentioned, which I think is really, really important, and how we're managing that, or, within the workplace, I think, we need to really talk about that. Like, what are some of the strategies? Like, and I'll start with Stefanie. I know you introduced a concept called techneractions, right? Like being able to kind of figure out what is the best way to interact with one another, because it doesn't necessarily mean technology. And then as we move to Allison, I really want to talk more about sort of those nonverbal cues and how you're connecting with your team and what you're seeing for the future. So I'm going to throw it over, Stefanie, if you want to start there, and then Allison.
Sure. I'll be brief because I know we want to do breakouts, but I think the techneractions is a contraction of the words technological interactions. And I talked about this for those of you who were with us. When was that?
July.
Wow. Okay.
And this was all new.
Yes. And so what we have are two dimensions in that. One is the degree of social presence that's needed, and then the degree of data richness. And I think now we need more social presence because, again, it has to overcome those distances, the isolation, the loneliness, all of those other aspects. So we used to, a year ago, would have advocated more around video. Now what we say is really, what's the criteria for how much, when do you really need to be on video? And I get really passionate about this because digital fatigue is real. And what's different about it is not only the fact that you're on a computer screen and there's physical things happening because of that, but the difference is that everybody's staring at you all the time, and it's only a square of you. And yes, you can have speaker view and you can change that, but it's only a small part of you. And women in particular are staring at them, and we're getting better at it, but oh my gosh, I got to get my mustache done. Or, I got a wisp going on here. And so, I'm sorry, Kim, what did you say? And so again, because socialized, we're judged more by how we look, right? So there's lots of things. So I won't go into this too much, and there's a blog on that, but it's really, do you need data richness? So is it more important to project because we have to do this, or is it more important that we're connected? And the thing that I would do with teams, and it can be an incredible team building and bonding experience, to talk about when do we really need to be on video. And if we're off camera, to Ken's point earlier, we still have to stay engaged.
Right.
One of the things that video does is keeps us from multitasking. So if we can have an agreement that we're going to find a balance in that conversation alone is team building.
Yep.
Right. And then the other piece of it, I think, Allison or somebody said, have you been outside in the last days? Are you still wearing the same sweatpants? Right. Those pieces to it. We often advocate walking meetings. So if Allison and I are just talking about something and we're just catching up, and we don't need to be on video, we don't need to share anything, put on my earbuds, put my phone in, and let me walk around outside and get some of that wonderful sunshine while I can, even if I'm in the sweatpants that I've worn for 3 days, right? So.
And that's great.
If you want more, if anybody wants more on that and wants some help, I am more than happy. I can talk about this a long time. So.
And Allison, as from a leadership perspective, kind of building off what Stefanie just talked about, what do you see as kind of keeping teams cohesive and connected and all of those things?
Yeah, and I'll talk about it from my team perspective. I think like we're all guilty, likely of like sort of getting into that same routine, like team meeting. So even like recently, it's like, all right, we've started a new year. How do we keep people engaged? I scheduled a team meeting last week, a goat to meeting. So there's actually a farm in California where you can pay like $100 for a half-hour meeting. and they'll join like your Hangout or your Zoom link, and they'll take you all around the farm. It's all rescue animals, and introduce you to like the llamas and the cows. And I'm like,
I love that.
It's going to be so silly. But they all loved it because it was just like, we're not talking about work or staring at each other or like the awkward silences of like being asked to participate. It was just sort of like zone out and enjoy the goats for a half hour and see them basking in the sun. And trying to do other things, like we're going to do a gnocchi making class in a couple weeks. Like one of the gentlemen on my team is from Italy, so like wants to share his family recipe. So we're trying to find other ways to engage and keep that social and team aspect. The other thing, Stefanie, huge fan of the walking meetings. Oh, I have not been as good this winter just because it's been cold and dark, but when it was in the summer, for all of my one-on-ones, I'd say, I'm just going to call you, and I would go out for a walk. And I actually found them to be so much more productive because you're not distracted. Even though this, like we say, like, oh, video is on, I even find myself like, well, I can minimize Zoom and then I can go into Slack and do other things, right? So you're not really listening all the time. Where a phone call, my phone's in my pocket, I'm not distracted, I'm just listening to that person. So I think that really helps and just mixes it up a little bit.
Some nice feedback on that, Allison. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, Ikra and Jagati, just in terms of, one, generating, revenue for these farms. That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, that really is, but then also a nice solution to the awkward happy hours. That's great. So what we want to do at this point, and this is where we're going to try something new, and we want to break everybody off so we can continue the dialogue and maybe go a little bit deeper. And, again, certainly to Ken's point, do not want to hear from the students as well. So, as you go break off, what we're going to do is Allison and Stefanie are going to each facilitate a breakout room. And we want to think about the conversation you've heard and kind of put your thoughts, if you can, so that we're all kind of consistent in terms of what you've heard, what you like, what you wish, and what you wonder. Okay, so I wish, I wonder. And then we're going to have you go into the breakout room probably for the next, how are we doing on time here? Let's say the next 8 minutes, 7 minutes. And then we'll come back and then share insights from each of the group. And I recommend identifying somebody to take notes. So again, we're going to randomly go into breakout rooms and look forward to hearing from everybody when we come back.
We were in the midst of great conversation.
Me too. Yeah, me too. I wanted to hear Kristen.
Yeah.
I know she stopped mid-word. I
know.
I was just going to say I'll finish my sentence while we're gathering. But I wish I constantly mentor a lot of women, and whether they're in corporates or fintechs, and actually a lot of men too, balancing dual working families. People who were bold before COVID are now not bold anymore, and they're just like exhausted and giving up, and it's very sad. So I don't know what the call to action is there, but even that article that you sent, like about breaking the ceiling and staying engaged and stuff, I don't know how we help each other, but I think that's a wish, I guess, on the wonder.
Yeah. Well, great. So how was that for everybody? I know the breakout session we were in, we had some really good conversation, and assuming you probably did as well. I would love to hear just some insights. And Allison, let's start with your group. Just did somebody take notes?
Oh, Catalina, I think you're on mute. Yep.
Thank you. Yes, I took notes. So it was a great conversation. We started talking specifically about the student experience, and the question that Ikra, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, was how do we make sure that we stay engaged as students? How do we engage better, particularly to create meaningful encounters in a virtual world? And so she threw out an idea around creating a tutoring Teams platform potentially creating some kind of mentorship scheme where students could work with their academic counselors and potentially executives to do mentorship and be able to learn in that way. So it would be much more engaging. Laura suggested that, or not suggested, but shared with us that she actually participates in one of those and runs one of those, a peer tutor group. And it's really talking about the highs and the lows every day, the things that people are struggling with and what they're challenged with, as well as the successes that they have. And that's really important, particularly because it's very hard to concentrate as they're working through. There's so many things going on, both with multiple classes and then personal life, and how those two come together, and how do you set parameters to make sure that you're effective and performing, and not letting those different drivers interrupt what you're trying to do. And then the question around from Allison's, not question, but Allison's comment was just around the importance of setting boundaries, and that it's very easy to say yes to everything, and that we really need to think about what we say yes to, because it impacts the things we're saying no to that we really would like to actually do. Yeah. And so being able to do that and learning to do that, and Allison, feel free to jump in and add to that, because I thought it was a powerful point, that we need to learn how to do that and be very deliberate about those choices, but do it in a way that's not cutting people off necessarily, but negotiating and understanding what's important to them. And the key word I picked up from what she said was not just saying no, but no, and how can we get it done in a way that meets your needs, but that allows me to do the things that I've committed to doing too, because commitments are very important.
That's great. What a great concept of the no but no and. Yeah, that's really great. And I love, as we're talking about the students too, because I think there's a lot of kind of just assumptions made around being digital natives that they're all comfortable with this, whereas there's so much research out there just that connection piece of it, that personal connection piece of it, whether at school or in the workplace, is just so incredibly important. So Stefanie, we were in Stefanie's group, and Christine, did you take notes on that? Did you want to share?
I did take some notes, and
we'll help you out.
Okay, thank you. Because they're a little scattered. So one of the likes was that this whole pandemic thing has elevated the soft skills that women excel at. So it feels like women have a little bit of an edge finally. There's a lot of wondering if things will be different now. Some people are actually very confident that it will be different after this. Some people are less sure. There's some worry about assimilation of younger employees because of the lack of personal connectivity at work, and also just the different ways that they engage with technology that older people may do differently. Like we still actually use the phone to talk. And then one person was very happy not to be traveling so that she could be home with her kids. And let's see. Oh, yes, but and this Kristen bringing back the boldness, wondering if we can bring back boldness after this, which is very interesting. I think that's it. Did I forget anything really major?
I think you hit on things. I think, to Lynn's point, I mean, just that you wished that this was kind of a way of doing things when, our kids were younger and that sort of thing. And that, again, I think it plays to a lot of the silver linings around this, that, while it's been a struggle, there have been some good that's come out of it, right? And, so being able to, for those that are able to balance it, but in any event, it certainly is quite a topic. I'd like to throw it out there. We've got, oh my goodness, if anybody else didn't have a chance to share something that would like to share with the group. No? Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So, again, just huge thank you for a very interactive and engaging session. And again, our first time through it, and we will be working to perfect this and so forth from a timing perspective. But to our presenters, Allison and Stefanie, just thank you so much for providing your expertise, and we're so thankful for having your voices to lead the discussion today. And it's been an absolute pleasure, and I think that, you know, we probably could have gone on for at least another hour. It was really, really fabulous. So I thank you both very, very much for your time today and leading up to the session as well. So we look forward to meeting again in March. Again, we're on a monthly cycle now, and meeting at the top of the hour. And we're going to continue with an interactive format. We're going to try some new things, and, you know, if we stumble, we'll get up and try something new. So again, we're looking forward to that. And the next 3 sessions coming up, so March, April, May, are going to be really focused on blockchain, digital currency, and digital assets, and cybersecurity. We're not necessarily sure right now of which order, but what the program lineup will be. So stay tuned for more information. And again, with that, I would just love to say thank you to all, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you in a month.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.